Matthew 2, the origins of Jesus the Messiah. If you recall, Matthew chapter 1 explored the genealogy of Jesus and talked then about his background in terms of his ancestry. Chapter 2 is really interesting because it will explore his origins in terms of location. Where is Jesus from? And really intriguingly, the chapter answers with three different locations. Jesus is from Bethlehem. Jesus is from Egypt. Jesus is from Nazareth. Which is it? And why all three? The origins of Jesus the Messiah in chapter 2 give us some explanation of this. It's kind of an apologetic answer, but also an explanation of some important Old Testament ties. In order to analyze this chapter, here's the way we're going to talk through it. We'll talk about two events, 4 Old Testament references, and 3 big theological ideas. 2 events, 4 Old Testament references, and 3 big theological ideas. Let's start with the 2 events. The first is one that you recognize and are familiar with. It's the wise men coming to find the King of the Jews. We have seen his star in the east, they say, and we have come to worship him, this King of the Jews. It's really extraordinary. How do they know some of this information? They know certain things that are very striking. For instance, they know that he is born. And they assume that he is the king of the Jews, but something in their understanding is going deeper because after all, they come to Herod the king. I think because these are wise men, it's safe enough to assume they probably are thinking of this king of the Jews in something more than just an earthly kingship. Why would they ask Herod the king about that kind of information? In some ways, they're coming in with great wisdom, and in other ways, they're coming in with a bit of naivete. What's going on here? There are the standard qualifications that we make with the Magi. Of course, we recognize that there's no reason to think that they were only 3. We don't know how many they were. We don't know their names. We shouldn't necessarily translate kings. Probably it's more like court officials or aristocracy or gurus. The word Magi actually appears in the book of Daniel to refer to wise men who are also in the position of kind of a government authority, like a diplomatic contingent. The group that would come in order to congratulate a new king or a new government being set up. How did they know? How did they get this information? Well, they give us some answer. We have seen his star in the east. But are there other links possibly? We don't know exactly where they came from, but the strongest ties based on the word Magi and based on the statement of where they were located east is probably somewhere around Babylon. Is it possible that these men would have received or known some of the revelation? Some of the clearest revelation in Daniel 9 even gives us the timing of the Messiah's coming. Could someone, wise men, have looked at that information in the book of Daniel, written in Babylon, and have extrapolated some of these realities? I don't think we should eliminate the possibility. Certainly these are tantalizing prospects. In any case, it's also clear that while they have a lot of information, they know a lot of things, they're also missing some pieces of the puzzle. It's as if they have the picture with some really big parts missing. And those big parts missing are going to be found by talking to the Jews. What we've got set up already is the wisdom of Gentiles stepping in, and they've got part of the puzzle, but the last piece of the puzzle, they need help, special revelation, God having spoken to his people. And of course, that's some of the richness of the answer. They come asking where the Messiah would be born. Herod goes and demands of the chief priests and the scribes where the Messiah would be born, and they answer quite clearly, Bethlehem of Judea, quoting Old Testament revelation, Micah 5:2. In other words, the missing piece of the puzzle is right here, and it's God's special revelation that guides them. One other detail just to mention about the Magi is when we talk about the gifts. And of course, this has sparked all kinds of speculation, even about the names of the Magi and what they mean. We're not exactly sure. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. What all is all of the significance here? Probably it's a little unfounded to talk about two specific ideas about his death and burial. But in any case, these are very valuable gifts. These are gifts befitting a king. These are what you would expect a diplomatic contingent to bring, congratulating the king. And practically speaking, this maybe even was part of providing for Mary and Joseph's travels during the first year of Jesus' life, for them to travel down to Egypt and back. That takes me to the second incident, or the second major event of Matthew 2, and that is the murder of the innocents. Now, in the next section, you see that Herod, in desperation and fear, steps out to try to destroy the young child. And this is the language here. Herod will seek to destroy him. Herod does that exactly. He slew all the children that were in Bethlehem from 2 years old and under, exactly according, or just reasoning by the time when the wise Magi came, and then extrapolating out, okay, the child must be under this age. And you notice even that this was part of what was in Herod's mind from the very beginning. If you go just back a little bit, he's already scheming, go and search diligently. When you have found him, come, tell me that I may come and worship him also. He's looking at this and already trying to find a way to eliminate the child. That takes me to the 4 Old Testament references. The 4 Old Testament references are very critical for understanding this passage. The first is here, Micah 5:2. That passage is directly linked to Bethlehem. Thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah. Out of thee will come the governor that will rule my people Israel. That's Davidic. In context, you can see that it's messianic and that it connects even to the future victory, the one who will reign forever and ever. It's a very valid and clear connection, fulfilling the messianic promises. The second connection is a little less clear. This is Hosea 11:1. Out of Egypt I have called my son. In context, it's talking about Israel being taken from Egypt in the Exodus, God bringing them out of Egypt. And so it's not exactly easy to see how this connects to the Messiah, except possibly to say everything that Israel should have been, Jesus now fulfills. Jesus now fulfills where Israel failed. Jeremiah 31 verse 15 is the next passage quoted here in verse 18. There was in Ramah a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children because they are not. Again, the original context is a little different and a little bit challenging. It refers to Israel being taken out on their way to Babylon and crying, weeping as they go. But there's a little bit more to that, because when you look in the context of Jeremiah 31 verse 15, right after that now comes the new covenant and the passages and promises about God's delivering his people in the new covenant. Probably what's going on here is the idea that great sorrow is followed by great joy. Great pain, death, and horror is going to be fulfilled and completed in great victory, and Jesus is tied in with much of that. The final Old Testament passage is found in verse 23. That it would be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. Of them all, this is probably the most challenging of the passages, because there is no clear passage that says these words. And there are different attempts or possibilities for understanding this. Some have proposed that Jesus took the Nazarite vow, so Jesus was a Nazarene. Another possibility is that this is a quotation in Isaiah 11:1, the branch, and the Hebrew word sounds like Nazarite, and so maybe this is it. Or the possibility I prefer is simply that this concept, Jesus being called a Nazarene, Nazarene would be a common mocking label. Oh, a Nazarene, a person from Nazareth, a way of just dismissing someone. And in fact, if you go further in the Gospel of John, you see people doing this very thing. Oh, he's just from Nazareth. Has any good thing come from Nazareth? And the idea then is not per se that the prophets say these words, he will be called a Nazarene, but that the prophets repeatedly indicate that Jesus will be mocked, hated, treated poorly, and viewed as nothing. And of course, that's precisely what happened in his life. That takes me then to talk about the 3 big theological ideas. And the first of them is this: God controlling the story. Okay, think through the story. And at the very beginning, just out of nowhere, here these magi show up. Shockingly, who are these people? Where did they come from? There is no answer except that God has stepped into the story. He's allowed them to see a star, a miraculous star. This star has miraculously led them here. He's brought them to the right time and the right place. And they've heard from these chief priests the answer that they needed to hear, to go to Bethlehem and to see him. God intervenes. But then God intervenes again. He turns the Magi away so that they don't return back to Jerusalem. They don't warn Herod, and therefore Herod is not able to capture the Messiah. God intervenes. God intervenes a third time when he tells Joseph and Mary to return back from Egypt because Herod now is dead. And over, God is stepping in, directing this story. It's telling you a very strong apologetic of God's providence and how he ironically turns a mess into his plan. The second big theological idea is the apologetic of Jesus' birth. How can one person be from three places? What you discover later on in the Gospels is that this becomes a major issue with Jesus. People saying things like in the Gospel of John, well, isn't it true that the Messiah is born in Bethlehem? How could he be from Bethlehem? He's not the Messiah. He's not from there. Or they'll say later, could any good thing come from Nazareth? Or he's from Galilee. And they'll dismiss him this way. How could Jesus be from all three of these places? But this problem actually becomes part of Matthew's apologetic, because his answer is, and yes. In the short years of Jesus' life, in a day when people did not travel that much, here you've got a person who was born in Bethlehem, lived in Egypt, came out of Egypt, and grew up in Nazareth. They're all true. And in fact, there are hints already in the Old Testament, Matthew argues, that would require him to do these things. How could one person fulfill all of those prophecies? Jesus did. And part of Matthew's argument is that the problem of Jesus' birthplace is actually an argument for Jesus' legitimacy as the Messiah. But the final theological concept, and one that we've got to recognize, is that the Gentiles accept while the Jews reject. But this is part of the irony all the way through the passage. Start out at the beginning. The Magi are coming seeking him. The people in Jerusalem know nothing about it. Bethlehem is only 5 miles away from Jerusalem. So Herod could have gone up. The high priests, the chief priests, and the scribes could have gone up. Even though they've heard of this news and a diplomatic contingent arrives and creates a stir in the city and everyone's talking about it, no one bothers to go up. It's the Gentiles who go and worship. They acknowledge the king. Remember, the king of the Jews. And the Jews never even bother. At the same time, the extraordinary thing is that the language of worship is all through here. Meaning that the Jews willingly and gladly accept the coming of their Messiah, while the Gentiles the Gentiles accept, while the Jews do not even bother to follow up and to understand or pursue what they've heard. And the irony then extends further when you move into the second half of the chapter. Because ironically, Herod, who is ruling over Jewish people, becomes the closest parallel to Pharaoh. Remember, there's another incident that's quite parallel to this one, and it has overtones of Egypt language with it again, that it's Pharaoh trying to eliminate all of the children and decimate the Hebrew population. And that concept itself links further back, if you follow a pattern across the entire Old Testament. The promise of the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And the history of the Old Testament is the history of the seed of the serpent, wicked people trying to destroy the seed of the woman. Or another way of saying it, trying to eliminate the people of God so that there won't be a Messiah. And you have this concept stretched all the way through the Old Testament in multiple ways. Will the seed of the woman succeed? Will the seed of the woman be preserved? Will there be a Messiah? But the story of the Old Testament is that God intervenes. He preserves his people over and over again. In spite of their failures, in spite of their sin, in spite of the attempts of the wicked to destroy them, God's people are preserved. And that extends not because of God's people being better, but because of God's promises that he will send his Messiah. And in the end, the Messiah's coming then is the same set of histories. Again, wicked people try to stamp out the Messiah before he comes, and God preserves his Messiah. There's one final link that's beautiful, and it extends from the Magi specifically. It's the link of the Magi coming from a distant land, bringing gifts to the Messiah. And you have again prophecies from the Old Testament. The kings of Tarshish and of the isles will bring presents. The kings of Sheba and Zeba shall offer gifts. Kings shall fall down before him. All nations shall serve him. Isaiah 60, the Gentiles shall come in thy light, and the kings to the brightness of thy rising. They will come and they will worship. They will worship the coming Messiah. And again, you see, they will bring thy sons from afar, their silver and their gold with them, unto the name of the Lord thy God, to the Holy One of Israel, because he hath glorified thee. Kings shall minister unto thee. The Gentiles will come, and their kings will be brought. And the marvel of Matthew 2 is that while these promises in Isaiah and in the Psalms point far into the future, when Jesus reigns from the New Jerusalem as king, already in Matthew 2, at his birth, the prophecies are beginning. There's a foreshadowing. Watch as the kings come and worship the Messiah, and see in that event pointers far into the future, when Jesus Christ, the Messiah, will reign over all planet Earth, and all kings will joyfully acknowledge his rule.